I have been in the trenches fighting for the things that matter.
And in many ways, running Border States Electric, a 100% employee-owned company, is a lot like the role of the governor.
The problem with that is the legislature doesn't work for you.
Well, I think it is a little insulting to think that a CEO doesn't have relationships. I am not a career politician.
The career politician thing is a little frustrating to me, but so be politics. But we're getting a ton of support all across the state, and we're running a positive campaign.
I don't know that it's positive when he says I haven't supported Trump. I have been a Trump supporter since 2016.
We are investing taxpayer money in North Dakota's own demise. I was a girls coach. I was a boys coach. Boys should not play girls sports. That is just a fact.
I think we won the culture wars during the last legislative session.
I for sure want the federal government making almost no school decisions.
As it relates to the book bans, who wants their child to see pornography in the library?
Would red flag laws help?
They might help. They're just unconstitutional.
Well, this is one thing I completely agree on with my opponent. Red flag laws are not the solution to gun violence.
Tonight, we're going to have a debate between the two candidates for the Republican nomination for governor of North Dakota. They are Congressman Kelly Armstrong and Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller. Each of you seem to be trying to out-conservative the other and tie yourselves to former President Trump, and those are the ads that we're seeing on television and radio right now. So let me ask both of you, but starting with Congressman Armstrong, what are the differences between you and your opponent?
What are the differences between me and my opponent? I've been in this game. I've been in the fight. I have a private sector background. I have a legal background. I've been engaged heavily in the energy and the ag industry in the state of North Dakota. And I have been in the trenches fighting for the things that matter, for both at the state legislature and the federal level.
This position as governor is the leader of the state, the CEO of the state of North Dakota, the leader of the executive branch. I have had extensive executive experience running Border States Electric. And in many ways, running Border States Electric, a 100% employee-owned company, is a lot like the role of the governor, making every decision at Border States. I did it for the employee owners, and in the state of North Dakota, I will be making every decision for the citizens of North Dakota. We have been around the state doing lots of community meetings. I have a very good understanding of what the issues are.
If you have a rebuttal.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is the legislature doesn't work for you. County commissioners don't work for you, city commissioners don't work for you, and your constituents don't work for you. This is a relationship business. If you're going to figure out how to really reform property taxes and lower property taxes, you better have active engagement from the legislature, and you better recognize that they have a say in that matter too, and quite frankly, a larger say than we do. If you are going to figure out a way to lower it at the state level without allowing municipalities to raise it at the local level, you better have those conversations and those relationships on the front end.
Well, I think it is a little insulting to think that a CEO doesn't have relationships. Managing a multi-billion-dollar company, growing it from $485 million to over $2.5 billion, doesn't happen without good relationships, not only with employee owners, but with customers, vendors, and community leaders as well. I am not a insider. I am not a career politician. I have not been elected before, so there may be a lot of folks across the state who don't know me. So we wanted to spend a lot of time helping North Dakotans get to know me a little bit, get to know my small town values.
I got sworn in January of 2019. Lieutenant Governor Miller got appointed to the governor's office in June of 2019. She's been in Bismarck as long as I've been in D.C. Prior to that, I was a volunteer, part-time legislator in the state Senate. I was also a partner in my law firm, vice president of my dad's company, helping run a small business both in North Dakota, South Dakota, commercial real estate, and serving as a volunteer firefighter and volunteer president of a nonprofit board. So the career politician thing is a little frustrating to me, but so be politics.
Is there anything in the Armstrong ads that you would like to respond to directly?
Well, very disappointed that my opponent came out negative with some fake news and information that was not correct. I'll just leave it with that. Very disappointing, because I'd like to run a positive campaign, and I think we should both run on our records and our experience.
Congressman Armstrong, and last words.
Yeah, my biggest frustration in politics, and it's been my frustration since I first started, is when people poll test answers, they go out, they run their commercials, and they do all of that. People are striving for access and they're striving for authenticity. And if you've been in DC for 5 years and see what I've seen, we're going to make sure we're running out and we're talking about the things people want to talk about. But we're getting a ton of support all across the state, and we're running a positive campaign.
I don't know that it's positive when he says I haven't supported Trump. I have been a Trump supporter since 2016, and we need Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. as our next president. That's the first thing we need to do, is elect him as our next president. With Donald Trump, I was at some of the same events that my opponent was at in Mandan, as well as being at a Trump event in Fargo. I've voted for Trump both times. I've supported Trump, and I was the first candidate to endorse Trump.
What private sector experience do you have that prepares you for the job?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I've been in the oil and gas business since before I was born. Learned how to practice law with my great friend Alex Reichert in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Moved back to work for my dad's company. Been in the oil and gas industry. Whatever the opposite of big oil is, that's what we are. We had 9 employees until I ran for Congress. 3 of them had the last name Armstrongs. We've been in the farming and ranching business in western North Dakota, ran small businesses on Main Street and around Dickinson, North Dakota, commercial real estate. I have a long, varied background in exactly the same kind of businesses that have grown this state, and I've been proud to create jobs in western North Dakota and have seen the good times and the bad, both in the oil industry and the ag industry.
I've spent most of my adult life in business. I started working at the family business as a teenager. Went on to be a CPA, worked with many, many businesses across the state of North Dakota, large and small, and joined one of my clients, Border States, when it was a much smaller company. I had the privilege of becoming the CEO in 2006. We put together a strategy in 2006 when we were a $485 million company. We wanted to double the size of the company in 5 years to provide a better return to our employee owners. And we did that. We grew the sales from $485 million to over $1 billion in 5 years. That happened between 2006 and 2011. Remember what happened during that time? The Great Recession. So we knew how to make tough decisions. We knew how to build a big team. And we knew how to attract folks to our team, to share our vision, and to achieve our goals.
With the rising costs of vital prescription drugs that many North Dakotans rely on, what steps do you plan to take as governor to ensure that older people and their families have affordable access to these life-sustaining drugs? Lieutenant Governor Miller first.
Well, thank you. I am very familiar with seniors and medication and their challenges. My parents are 85 and 88, and they live right next door to us. So we are with them on a regular basis and help them with a lot of their issues. And we do know the high cost of prescription drugs. The first thing we need to do is reduce inflation, and the way we're going to do that is to have a change in the White House. We need to get Joe Biden out of the White House and Trump in the White House so that we can work on inflation and we can make sure that our seniors have more of their hard-earned retirement income in their own pockets.
Congressman Armstrong.
You know, one of the great things about North Dakota, and particularly insurance, unless you're talking about flood insurance or crop insurance, is it's particularly a state-regulated agency, which means they have less of the problems of the federal government. But one of the things I think that has happened, and I've seen this in D.C., is in our, I don't care if you're the world's greatest medical insurance person in the world, you're not qualified to say whether a generic drug or a prescription drug is applicable. So we have to work with our carriers, whether it's Blue Cross, whether it's Sanford, and make sure that those markets exist. I think there are potentials for pulling small businesses together to lower some of those rates overall. But the reality is we have to fix the patent problem that exists with prescription drugs and deal with those things. And a lot of that is going to be working with our federal delegation.
How do you approach a legislative session?
You approach it the same way you do as the legislature. You open, communicate, you find out from the majority leaders. We're blessed. We have Republican supermajorities in both chambers. We're going to have a Republican in the governor's residence, and we have the relationships with them. So you figure out what their priorities are, make sure they know what your priorities are, and start working on that, quite frankly, before the legislative session, but also pushing it forward.
Well, I will hit the ground running in the 25 legislative session. We'll have been involved in all of the strategy reviews with state agencies as well as all of the budget discussions. And there are some big themes that are coming out that we're already collaborating with legislators on, as we did last session. Those include taxes and housing. So we will be well positioned. We will have our legislative relationships and champions in place as we start the next legislative session.
Question about the legacy fund. Any thoughts on what to do with it? And Congressman Armstrong, I'll start with you.
Yeah, make it a lot more transparent. We lost, North Dakota taxpayers lost a ton of money when Russia invaded Ukraine, and we had to get out of Russian divestment. It seems to me that the solution to that now is we have $800 million in a global region market, international region market, and developing region market. And that's about as far as you get in $800 million in North Dakota taxpayer money. Government's at its worst when it's paternal. When government says, if you just knew what I knew, you would do what I do.
We are very fortunate to have the Legacy Fund. We know that oil is a finite resource, and the Legacy Fund will be there when we no longer are collecting taxes from oil. We have great transparency with the Legacy Fund. There is an online tool, and all of the meetings that we conduct at the state are open meetings. So citizens of North Dakota can tune into those meetings and learn everything they want about the Legacy Fund.
Do you have something you'd like to say?
I think the transparency argument's a little, yeah, there's $800 million invested in emerging markets. We don't know what any of that money is, and we should be concerned because we're invested in 23 banks in 12 countries that have actually signed the net zero pledge. That means they have agreed to support issues, ESG, all of those things that are carbon neutral by 2050 or earlier. We are investing taxpayer money in North Dakota's own demise. And that's the money we know that is invested, let alone the money that we have. $800 million in emerging markets is not transparency.
I think we do have good transparency with the Legacy Fund. The fund is always looking for opportunities, and we do have to divest of investments in these countries that hate us and are doing everything to undermine the U.S. So I completely agree.
Where do you see the big issues are in energy in 2025?
Well, I think the biggest issues in energy are going to be from the federal government. We have a uniquely problematic EPA that has existed. I mean, the EPA's mercury rule is specifically designed towards lignite coal. It's exponentially problematic for North Dakota. I mean, we don't blend our lignite. We do all of those different issues. But I think that's the challenges, and our challenges are to work with the legislature, work with the Attorney General, particularly in pushback.
Well, the first thing we need to do is get President Biden out of the White House and elect Donald Trump as our next president to stop this crazy regulation that is trying to kill our biggest industries with energy and agriculture. As the CEO at Border States, I worked very closely with a lot of utilities in North Dakota and throughout the United States, so very much understand reliable, affordable electricity and how important that is to our country and our way of life. So we have to protect coal and reliable baseload energy.
Does North Dakota need to do more in terms of preserving emails and being more transparent in government?
Absolutely. We did see some things that were very unfortunate with the Stenjum investigation. We need to have consistent policies across state agencies on record retention, and we need to make sure that it's consistent across all agencies and that one individual or one agency can't decide what should be retained and what should not be retained.
I'm fine with consistency and transparency, but the other thing you need is you have real accountability on the back end. I've dealt with this for 5 years in D.C. Every time we catch the FBI doing something or do it by law, they say, we're going to do more training, we're going to put in more regulations in place. And that's all fine and good, but our citizens have lost faith in government. And they have done that, and you know this, and some of it's social media, some of it's, there's a lot of different reasons, but the single best way you can gain their trust back is one, go talk to them and listen to them, and two, make sure that they know that the rules that apply to them apply to government as well.
I believe North Dakota is 6 weeks, the 6-week ban. Was that a good idea, or does that need to be changed?
I think it was a good idea. I was served in the state Senate when we had a ton of these bills coming forward. I know there's some litigation going on. My mom was a Catholic kindergarten teacher. I've grown up pro-life. I'm proud to have a 100% pro-life record moving forward. I think the one thing we have to make sure and work through, and have to, is to make sure that whatever medical exceptions exist are clear-cut on the ground, perfectly acceptable, because I don't want an emergency room doctor in a car accident having to be a defense attorney. I want him to be an emergency room doctor.
I completely agree. I grew up in a small town, Brockett, North Dakota, have deep Christian values, attended the Catholic Church, and am pro-life. I completely support the pro-life legislation we have in North Dakota today. It is the right thing for North Dakota, and it's appropriate for our states to make the decision.
Did the legislature go too far in some of the things they passed? And how do we make our state welcoming to people who may be of that character?
Did they go too far? I don't think so. But I mean, the number one thing, I was a girls coach, I was a boys coach. Boys should not play girls sports. That is just a fact. That is a reality. And the other answer is you should not be making life-altering either hormonal or surgery decisions on 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old kids. That being said, I mean, every kid, whether you're 16 or whether you're 22, has the right to be who you are. I'm pretty libertarian about a lot of those different issues, and I'm okay with that. But you should not be making life-altering decisions on 13, 14, 15-year-old kids.
I think we won the culture wars during the last legislative session. We made some really big and important decisions on important topics. I agree with what my opponent said. We don't want our girls to be competing in sports with boys unless they're co-ed sports. We need to make sure that kids are not making life-changing decisions before they're adults. So I agree, we have made the right decisions, and I think we have won the culture war.
The idea of making it easier to ban books, was that a good thing?
I just want to back up a little. We call it culture war, but I've been from one end of the state to the other over the last 3 months. This is what people care about. This is what the grassroots cares about in small towns and big towns and all of those different issues. I always get torn on that issue because I really believe in local control in education. I really believed in it in the legislature, and I can tell you after 5 years in D.C., I really believe in it too. I want local school boards making those decisions, and I want Bismarck making less of the school education decisions, and I for sure want the federal government making almost no school decisions.
As it relates to the book bans, who wants their child to see pornography in the library? And as folks move around, it's not just in one school or one school district. We have to have consistency across the state. I think with books as well as with transgender sports. Those are not issues that can be done school by school because kids are moving around. And I think it's important that we address these issues and we are consistent across the state.
Are there things that you could see that could be done that might be okay with the Second Amendment and still could bring gun violence down? I'll start with Congressman Armstrong.
Yeah, prosecute prohibited people. Enforce the laws you have. That's what you can do. You can prosecute people for gun charges. You can have better synergy between different states. If you've been convicted by a jury of your peers of a violent crime, we want to know that. We don't care if it's Florida or Missouri or Louisiana. If you are up here working in North Dakota, we want to know that. But the reality of every single gun piece of legislation I have seen in D.C. or in states all across the country is, one, they're unconstitutional. I mean, when you talk about banning assault rifles, all you have to do is read the Heller decision, common use. The most common use gun in the United States is an AR-15, which does not stand for assault rifle, by the way, which is also fun to deal with in D.C. So it's unconstitutional to do that. So the single best thing you can do is let law-abiding citizens own guns and force the people who have been convicted of crimes that have forfeited their right and enforce that heavily.
Lieutenant Governor?
Well, as my dad said, all of us kids grew up with BB guns, probably starting at 5 years old, and then advanced up to bigger guns as we got older. Used a 16 gauge to protect our family business when I was in high school and college, when robbers were trying to steal from Miller's Shopping Center on the Prairie, and it took 30 minutes for law enforcement to come from Devil's Lake. So very, very supportive of the Second Amendment. And we need to keep guns in the hands of good guys and girls. The bad guys, they're always going to find ways to get guns. So I don't think more regulation is going to make a difference.
Would red flag laws help?
They might help. They're just unconstitutional. I've never seen one that actually protects due process rights. I spent a lot of time dealing with interim hearings and hearings, ex parte hearings, and I could tell you exactly what happens. Nobody's erring on the side of it. And even when you're dealing with those issues, there is no, I have read, I think, every red flag law that exists in this country, and I have never found one that I think adequately protects Second Amendment rights. Everybody loves the concept of it. That's great. But you have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and if you don't have the ability to go into court and actually argue against whatever's coming at you, that's a real problem.
Well, this is one thing I completely agree on with my opponent. Red flag laws are not the solution to gun violence. We need to find a way to get guns out of the hands of the bad guys, and I don't think red flag laws do that.
Governor Burgum appeared before a legislative interim committee saying he's probably going to have different budgets to deal with EPA regulations based on who wins the presidency. Is it going to be Biden? Is it going to be Trump? I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Lieutenant Governor Miller. Is that the right thing to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And first, we need to make sure that Donald Trump is our next president. We need to elect Donald Trump in November. These regulations that are coming out of the Biden administration are literally killing our agriculture and energy industries. There are volumes of regulations coming out. We need to stop that. We need to push back on that. And we need to solve our challenges in North Dakota with innovation, not regulation.
I think it's partially true. I agree completely that Donald Trump was the greatest president for small business, ag, and energy in North Dakota's history. And far, if he gets here, a lot of the things that are in the pipeline are going to go away immediately, because I know the people he works with. I know who he consults on these things, and he loves North Dakota. He loves North Dakota production and loves small business and wants us to be able to exert that energy dominance around the world stage. The second part to this, though, is there's existing regulations. And legacy regulations are really difficult to get rid of regardless of who the president is.
We have a lot of jobs, and we're not getting people to fill the jobs. So as governor, and I'll start with you, Congressman Armstrong, how do you tackle that problem?
You have to figure out how to incentivize. One, we have to home grow a lot of it. I think there's different issues in all those things. It's expensive to educate nurses. It's expensive to do those things. I think a lot of our universities, like College of Science, Wahpeton, Bismarck State Polytechnic, all of those different issues, they're working forward towards that. But we have to do a really good job of home growing a lot of these things and providing education to North Dakota kids for the jobs that exist in the North Dakota economy. And I watched this in Western North Dakota. I graduated in 1995. If you didn't work for four corner businesses, you had to leave. Now it's the opposite. Every single kid who graduates from high school in North Dakota can stay here and work. And so we have to do that. But then we also have to figure out, I don't think it's real rocket science. We have to figure out what our highest need jobs are. And we got to figure out a financial incentive to fill those with people.
Workforce is our number one challenge. Every day we say we have 30 to 40,000 jobs open in our great state. It's the number one challenge to growing and diversifying our economy. Along with getting people here, we also have to solve the housing challenge, which is a top priority for us as we work toward the next legislative session. And we need to solve the child care challenge too.
It has to do with higher education. It's funded, and I have a multi-part question. Number one, is it funded correctly? Number two, are there changes that need to be made to the structure of higher education in North Dakota?
Well, higher education is a significant budget item for the state of North Dakota, but it's a great investment. It's an investment in our future. And I think, like everything in North Dakota, when we're spending taxpayer dollars, we don't just need to look at the inputs and how much we're spending on higher education. We need to absolutely focus on the outputs. Our young adults leaving higher education with the skills, with the education, the training they need to have a productive career? And will that career be sufficient to pay off their student loans?
I think the overall structure is always interesting. You have an overall higher education system in North Dakota, and then you have some competition that is sometimes good, sometimes bad, but we have to get rid of the petty fighting and have a synergy involved that we're developing a workforce. I graduated from UND with 2 degrees. I love the University of North Dakota. My dad went to NDSU. My uncle went to NDSU. I actually love NDSU as well. But I can tell you the education you're getting at UND is not 4.5 times as good as the one I got. But all in, that's what you're paying. And we have to figure out a way in which to reduce those costs and make it affordable, and also going towards those things and increase graduation rates and then increase in-state retention rates.
There was an effort to get Ukrainians to come to the oil fields to work. Is this part of the future as well?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misfortunes about the the biggest short-term threat we have in the United States right now is the southern border. It's the single one. The northern border is always also an issue, and dealing with legal commerce. But if you talk to anybody who's been engaged in this, not only is, the legal immigration part of it gets caught up in the illegal immigration part, which is politically untenable in DC right now. It just really is. That's the reality of it. But it's getting harder. And this is the problem, because the person who's doing H-2A compliance in North Dakota is also cooking breakfast, also doing the books, also taking a kid to school. Whereas the person who's doing it at a big agribusiness in Nebraska or Missouri, they have an entire group of people that are set up to do this. And so I know farmers northwest of Minot that have been bringing South Africans here for 20 years. Great relationship, great workforce. But if you get delayed by 1 month in North Dakota with our growing season, and it's that much harder to deal with it, then it's really, really problematic. And we know this is the number one call we get in our office, so we have to make it easier for that to happen as well.
I agree. We need to make legal immigration easier. I have been in many communities around the state, and at events like at vets clubs, I'll run into some of these African workers. These individuals love working in the United States. They come back every year. Why can't we make it easier for them to become North Dakota citizens and work in North Dakota legally? Instead, we're fighting these crazy border battles on the southern border. We have 125 of our National Guard's men and women trying to protect the border from us. And it's not just the south, it's the northern border too.
And I'd like to thank both our candidates for being here for tonight's debate. Again, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, Lieutenant Governor Miller, thank you both for being here.